Hey, what's up guys? I am Jerome from the Bonsai Supply and welcome to this week's video. Now in this video, we are going to be covering another species in detail and I chose the dwarf Yupon Holly, or also known as the Ilex shilling. Now here are some of the topics that you can expect us to cover in this week's video, such as what type of fertilizer do I use for this type of tree, when do I repot it, can I trim it any time of the year, what kind of pests and diseases does this tree get, and so much more. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Now I think the Yupon Holly is such a great candidate to use for bonsai because it naturally has smaller leaves, it has compact growth and very short internodes, which makes it such a great species to use if you want to create a smaller tree or even a show hen. Now, of course, the flowers are fantastic as well because the entire tree gets covered in these white little flowers all at the same time. Now, the timing of the flowering varies on your climate as well as on the health of the tree. So with that in mind, we know that we can create a smaller show hen tree with this, but also knowing that it has white flowers, we can use that to choose maybe a glaze pot to match with it, maybe like a white glaze pot to match with the flowers, or we could choose a contrasting color. Now also, you can pretty much turn this dwarf Yupon Holly into pretty much any style, but just keep in mind that if you were to go like a windswept, you would have to use a lot of wire to shape the branches because they naturally have very straight and long growth. Also, the branches take quite a long time for them to thicken up. They come out like a 2mm wire, very, very thin and straight. And then if you want them to thicken up, you would have to let them run out really far in order for the branches to get thick. Alright, so talking about the seasonal work, we have to start out in the spring because that's when we repot this tree. It is a temper tree, so we repot it in the spring at bud break. Now, depending on your climate, if it starts to flower right away instead of putting out new leaves, you can wait to repot this tree after the flower cycle has stopped, repot it then, and you're good to go. Now, if it does not put out flowers right away and it starts to put out leaves, you would repot it at bud break. And as always, keep it out of direct wind and keep it above 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The spring is also a great time to give your tree its first styling before it wakes up, or to do any type of grafts. Now, the next time of the year that you would do a major type of work to this tree will be in the middle of the summer when it goes into the dormant period because it is exhausted from growing so much. So it grows into that dormant period in the middle of the summer. That's when I like to go ahead and defoliate it, trim it, style it, remove large branches. It's a great time to do trunk chops as well. And then the next time I would work on this tree again would be like in the late fall. Trim back the overgrown canopy a little bit, maybe bend some larger branches, and then that is pretty much it. Now throughout the rest of the year, you can let your tree grow out past the canopy, let the new growth harden before you trim it back again. Now, in terms of placement, dwarf Yupon Hollies, they really love free draining bonsai soil. They like to be grown in full sun and they like to have a lot of water during the growing period. So from the once they start to wake up until they go to sleep, make sure you do not let them grow out under any circumstances. Now, in terms of propagation, this is just like any other tree. It can be propagated from seeds. It can be propagated from air layers and, of course, from cuttings as well. Now, the seeds, you would sow them depending on your climate. You would start the sowing process a little different. So I would recommend that if you grow them from seed, if you can find the seeds, that you do some research on it on how to do it exactly in your climate. Now, in terms of taking cuttings from the dwarf Yupon Holly, do that in the spring. Once the new growth has fully pushed out, they can be propagated from smaller branches. You can clip those, put them into soil, move them into the shade, and mist them several times a day until new growth emerges. Now in terms of air layering, I would like to do that in the spring after the first growth has fully pushed out and has hardened, and I don't have any more temperatures below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a great time to go ahead and apply that air layer. Now last but not least, we're going to be talking about the care and maintenance, and we're going to be covering topics such as watering, fertilizing, pests and diseases. So starting out with the watering, you want to make sure that you do not let your Ilex dry out once he wakes up in the spring. It is quite a vigorous grower once it gets going, and if you let it dry out, it is not very forgiving. So you want to make sure that you don't let the soil dry out completely ever. So I always like to water my Ilexes in the morning as soon as I wake up. Well, a little later than I wake up, so maybe around 8 a.m. I like to go ahead and give them a deep watering and then spot check again in the afternoon, maybe 3 to 5 p.m. Right now, it is excruciatingly hot, so I check it around 3 p.m. and I might just give the canopy a little mist. If the soil is still a little moist, just a little mist to cool down the leaves and the tree. Now, in terms of fertilizing, I like to start out in the spring. Once the first flush of growth has come out, that's when I like to start to apply my first dosage of fertilizer. And I like to use our all-purpose bonsai fertilizer, which is an 18-410, high firepower. That's exactly what you want for this tree. The internodes will still stay small even if you use a high nitrogen fertilizer. But what's great about this fertilizer, it gets the tree going. So when I use this for my dwarf Ilexes, they fill out immediately and then they start to push out so much more growth. Great fertilizer to use for your dwarf Yupon Hollies. Now for the pests and diseases, they quite have a lot of things that attack your Ilex. But don't worry, I'm going to show you and tell you exactly how you can prevent these things to occur. So some of the things that attack your tree are scale, leaf miner, spittlebug, root rot, nematode, and blight. Now, of course, root rot is the easiest one to overcome. Use good bonsai soil that has good free drainage and you will overcome that right away. Now, the nematode is another thing that can occur if it is grown in nurseries and the trees are grown on the ground, or if you get your Ilex from Florida, it can occur more often. But other than that, if you don't have your trees grown in the ground or they don't come from Florida, you also don't have to really worry about the nematode. It is rare to occur, I would say. I have never seen nematode on my Ilex over all of these years, but I've always heard that it could occur. Now for the scale, the leaf miner, and the spittlebug, I use a very simple solution for that. I do a preventative spraying, insect spraying that is. I use two different chemicals. I use a lucid, and then which is a miticide, and then I also use a tall star, which covers everything else. I start out once the trees start to grow in the spring with the lucid, first month, next month the tall star, and I go back and forth like this every other month between the tall star and the lucid, and I use this as a preventative method. And that way I keep everything off of my trees because I have different type of trees in my bonsai collection. If one is affected, that the insects could go over or the pests to another tree could happen very easily, and that is exactly why I like to spray once a month to keep all of my trees safe and secure. Now, if you have any questions or comments in regards to this video or anything that I said, you can go ahead and leave those down in the comment section. Now also, if this is your first time coming across this YouTube channel and you like bonsai, you may want to consider subscribing to this channel so that you're always up to date and always get notified when a new video comes out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.